and so many other empires. We have the Ashanti Empire, the Ahanta Empire, the Akwemu Empire, and several others. And because they were fighting among themselves for territorial gains, Gold Coast back then stretched to part of Togo, Benin, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and then Ivory Coast, and even Senegal. During the transatlantic slave trade, all those who were raided, being children and pregnant women, inclusively were placed in chains and shackles, receiving whips, almost naked and barefoot. They had to walk them to the Salaga slave market up north. A renowned historian here in Ghana documented in her book entitled The Indigenous Slavery of Ghana, Akosia Adomapegu. In her book, she stated that among all the slave markets we have in Africa, Ghana alone had close to 63 of those slave markets. We have Salaga, Sampa, Jeneni, Karachi, Kumasi, Semansu here, Cape Coast Castle, Elmina Castle, all the way to the Christiansborg Castle in Osu, just to mention a few. A British historian, W.E. Ward, also traveled during the era of slave trade. In his travel journal, he made mention in the book entitled The Short History of Ghana that among all these slave markets I've mentioned, Asemansu and that of the Salaga slave market up north played a major role, and the distance between these two slave markets is over 300 solid miles. Our ancestors were in chains and shackles. They were forced to walk through the jungle. Coming to the south, they met the nature park called the Mole National Park. Back then, Mole was full of wild animals. In order for them to walk freely through the park, the slavers were sacrificing our ancestors to the animals. They were using them as bequests. They took them off their chains and shackles, tied them around a tree, gave them multiple whips. The blood that comes out of them was sensed by the animals. And while the animals were busy feeding on them, they were able to move the rest out of the park. They succeeded, but lives were lost on that particular nature park. On the journey, they met a river called the Pra River. Because our ancestors from the hinterlands were not exposed to rivers, it became an obstacle. The survival of the fittest made it. The men who had the height and then the strength to cross the river had to pick the children and some of the women on their shoulders to cross. For those who were weak, drowned, and they died, right there they were buried at the bank of the river. On the journey, for the women, they had to go through a lot. Aside being raped by these souls, the slave raiders, they had to go through several treatments because they were crying on behalf of their own brothers and sisters. Even though they themselves were also in pain, they were still crying for them. And these people hate to see that because they thought the cry was actually falling on the wild animals. So they had to shut them up. To do that, they use either the stone method or they use the metal mask method. They take stones a little bit wider than their mouths, force it in there and then tie it around their neck, or they force a bunch of leaves into their mouth and then cover it with a metal mask. That way, you are allowed to shed your tears, but nobody hears your voice. They eventually got here in Asemansu, filthy, hungry, and very tired. Here, the slavers saw the need for them to take some days off to rest because this is going to be their market. And they did not allow them to rest because they were tired. They knew very well that these people coming from the Cape Coast Castle with their money in their pockets are here for healthy looking slaves. So here they allowed them to rest and they were fed also for them to get some flesh on their bones. In other words, to get enough money out of them. After that, the men who had their hairs bushy and their beards bushy were shaved with a broken bottle. They walked them to the river to take their bath. But before we go to the river, I'll be telling you about these graves. In the ancestral graveyard, we have 3 different graves. Here lies the mortal remain of Madame Crystal from Kingston, Jamaica, an enslaved African. Some all passing from New York City, United States. And before I go to the last one, I'll tell you about these 2. They are coming back home here before the year So, Madame Crystal was a former slave captain from Ghana. On arrival in Jamaica, she took it upon herself not to feed on anything being fed to them by the British. She went on a hunger strike. But back then, if you are found rebelling against the food, you have a treatment. It's either they force you for you to open your mouth willingly, or they use the chisel and hammer method. Then they'll have to knock your teeth with a chisel and hammer. Put a funnel in there, dish the food into the funnel. With the help of water, they push it down your throat. That way you stay alive for them not to lose their money. But this woman, as African as she was, focused as she was, tried to achieve her aim. So whenever they forced her to eat, she also forced the food out. She died in the process. Her dying wish was that whenever they gain freedom, they should bring back whatever remains of her is left, that they should bring it back home to be buried on their soil. Samuel Castle, on the other hand, happened to be the first African American to rise to the highest rank in the Navy. Yes, I bet you don't know about it.
No.
That's because that part of the history was scrapped. They don't want us knowing what we are capable of doing. So this man here, after all he has done for them, he wasn't even given a befitting burial when he died. So before they could be brought back home, the then tourism minister and then the president of Ghana here, the late J.J. Rawlings, traveled to Jamaica. He witnessed a celebration going on. He asked what the celebration was all about. Apparently, slave trade was abolished way back in the year 1804, effectively 1807. So for those in the Caribbean and then Haiti, Barbados, and some others started celebrating what they call the Emancipation Day, but not here in Africa. So 1994, that was when we Ghanaians or the Africans realized something like this was actually going on for several years. So he came back home to...
You said 94? 1994?
Yes.
You realized what was going on?
As in the Emancipation celebration.
Wow.
So, 1994, that was when they realized that it is time for them to celebrate it. It took them 4 years for the first ever emancipation celebration to start. That was in 1998. 1998 saw the return of these two mortal remains. They were then flown in by the Ghana Airways, moved by the sea because they left this continent via the sea. They are right. Their passage was the sea. So if you are bringing them back home, you should take them through the ocean. So they took them through the ocean to the Cape Coast Castle and then Elmina Castle. These two castles have a door they called the Door of No Return. It simply means once our forefathers walk through it, they are never coming back home here, whether dead or alive. It is true that these people went there, only hoped to return back home one day, but they never did. In 1998, their remains came back through the back door of the Door of No Return to make it a door of return. To some others, the year of return actually started on that particular day. That was in 1998. So they were brought here on the 31st of July to be buried on their own land and in their own soil so that their souls can finally find peace. The last one, as part of last 2 years celebration, year of return, we were all happy to receive our brothers and sisters back home. So many people were coming. Derek Johnson, A.J. Johnson, and a lot of them. The Prime Minister of Barbados decided to come back. On her way, she went to the graveyard where her ancestors were buried. Assumed everything, all the bones that she could find on that particular land was placed in a coffin and then brought back home on the 11th of November to be buried here so that this will serve as a link between the land of Africa and all those who died out there to bring them back home to rest in perfect peace. That's how come we have the third one. If you look on the walls, we have pictures starting from George Ekin Ferguson, Malcolm X, Queen Nanny of the Maroon family in Jamaica, Booker T. Washington, we have George Padmore, Harriet Tubman, Dr. Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, Anna Julia Copper, Sergeant Truth, Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, Emmanuel, aka the Fifth Peter, or Gordon, W.B. Du Bois, Marcus Mezar Garvey Jr., and finally we have have Captain Who's from Sola. These pictures here represent our freedom fighters. A lot of them. No.
What is it?
That's the hopper. So we have them here to represent all our ancestors who laid down their life
Do
for
you
the
know?
black race.
Do you know the year Sandra Carson and Crystal actually passed? Like when they actually died?
No, they weren't.
Okay.
So we have them here as our freedom fighters, and they actually died for us. Yeah, Martin, Malcolm, and several others died trying to put us at a position where we so deserve to be. So if you see them on the wall, that's their purpose. We'll be walking down to the walls there. I'll tell you about it. Then we walk to the river.